I'm just so happy that you're here doing this class. I don't know, I met Bob maybe 10, 15 years ago through Sharp, and I get goosebumps having him here. There are very few people in the world that are as genuine and sincere, and just compassion flows from their entire body than this one right here. So just an honor to have you here. Good luck living up to that. But,
I was going to say, how do you live up to that introduction?
So, there will be no more intros these
and
weeks.
It's mutual.
Oh, thank you.
It's mutual.
Enjoy.
So,
good luck.
So, thank you for coming. Jeff told me that there'd either be one person or 100,000. Okay, so we're in between already. And as I said before some of you came in, I've got allergies, and so I'm going to try to be as clear and project as best I can. My partner tells me he thinks that this is a sign that the universe is telling me to talk less. And he's probably right, but it's a little bit of a handicap when you teach. So I think what I wanted to do was first to set a context for what I'm going to teach in these 6 weeks, and most importantly, have you practice, because that's partly what I really value is, mindfulness and the Dharma can only really be understood if you practice and experience it. So maybe as a context, I can share with you briefly my own journey to get here to teach what I teach, okay? So at 19 years of age, I went into a Roman Catholic seminary to become a priest. And for 7 years, I was trained in, if you have a Catholic background, you know that the meditations of St. Ignatius Loyola is really a form of meditation training. And for 7 years I did that. And then when I left, a year before ordination, coming out into the world in the early 70s, and the Beatles were meditating, and TM, how many people started with TM? Oh, a lot of TM, right? Back in the 70s. And it blew my mind because I was so anxious, but that doing that meditation, which I was really kind of suspicious of, calmed me down and really began my journey of training my mind. And then in the early 90s, I got interested in Buddhism, Vipassana particularly, but with a lot of skepticism because I didn't want another religion. I didn't want something imposed on me. I wanted a way of life. And so for all these years since then, I've really practiced within the Vipassana Buddhist tradition. But then what happened is in 2012, I was working at Sharp Healthcare, where I retired a year ago. And I began to understand that the practices that we did within the Buddhist tradition could be taught in a secular environment. That we could teach people without the Buddhist model, we could teach people the liberation of suffering. So in 2012, I went to Stanford. I got accepted at Stanford's Center for Compassion Research and Education. And I got trained in those models of compassion, empathy, and mindfulness that were secular, okay? And yet I could see clearly from the beginning that I was really teaching the Dharma without calling it the Dharma. And so for the last 20 years at Sharp, I retired a year ago, and particularly the last 6 years there, my main role was to teach mindfulness in that model to the employees at Sharp. And the reason I share this with you is because the model I'm going to introduce you to, and maybe some of you know it, really does, it moves us into a more algorithmic way of practice that's completely consistent with the Dharma. When I teach what I'm going to teach, I have no doubt I'm teaching the Buddha Dharma. So, as you know, the Buddha was an extraordinary human being. How do we know? Well, when I went to 3 pilgrimages to India, and one of the questions I had was, how do we know that the Buddha existed, and that what we have in the suttas, in the scriptures, is really, it really does describe what the Buddha taught. And real quickly, they had an oral tradition for the first 100 years, the hundreds of monks who recited exactly what they heard the Buddha say. And then after about 100 years, they began to write it down. So we have good confidence that what we get in the scriptures, the Buddhist scriptures, are really what the Buddha taught. And, even his personality comes through, as you know, in some of the stories and the descriptions. And then what happened is, over this last 2,600 years, Buddhism, and many people, scholars talk about, we really should say Buddhisms, plural, because, it went from India, Buddha was an Indian, it went to China, and then over hundreds and hundreds of years, 500 years, it took on the culture of China and then moved to Japan and then Korea. And then only in the 1960s did Westerners come, actually some from the East, but Westerners traveled to India, Thailand, Burma, people like Jack Kornfield and Sharon Salzberg, who many of you know of. And they brought to us a Western form of Buddhism. And what that exemplifies is that Buddhism has always been culturally evolving. It took on, in China, it became Chan, which is really exemplified here. When it went to Japan, it took on the Zen culture. And people began to make the Buddha Dharma their own. And that's what's happening right now. And it's speeding up because the pace of our digital world and the way everything gets communicated, we're seeing the evolution of the Buddha Dharma right before our very eyes. And that's what this course is going to be about, is introducing you to a system that can be totally taught at Sharp. I taught a class this morning to nurses, and I can't teach Buddhism or Christianity or any religious metaphor in that environment because there's a mixture of people. But I was teaching the Buddha Dharma, and particularly mindfulness as it helps people relieve suffering. So, what we sometimes say is what's happening, that we're experiencing, is Buddha with a Western face. Buddha with a Western face. And the teacher who I was trained by in this model that's called Unified Mindfulness, Shinzen Young, 50 years, he's almost 80 now, I think he's just 80. 50 years ago, he set out to embrace the spirit of science and Western values, values like individuality and equality, diversity, individualism, our core values of our culture. And he set out to explore in all different spiritual traditions, what could he capture as sort of the essence, the mindfulness part of Native American rituals, of Christian prayer. So what Shinzen developed over 50 years is is an algorithmic system. It's a systematic way of training the mind that can either be taught in secular systems or settings, or it can be adapted by those of us who have a core tradition, whether it be Buddhist or Christian or Muslim or agnostic or atheist. And I think as we go along, if you come to these classes in the next 6 weeks, I'm going to introduce you to mostly practices, not just ideas, of how to maybe enrich your own practice. Okay? And that's what happened for me. About 7 years ago, I came across Shinzen Young's work and began to be really interested because I could teach it at Sharp. And then what I saw it do is really bring alive my Buddhist practice. Shinzen talks about what he calls getting caught in a good place. That sometimes our traditional practices emphasize concentration. You know, traditionally we're taught to focus on the breath, and then distractions come and go. And we may really develop a strong concentration practice. But for me, and many people, I would meditate every morning, and then I'd go out in the world, and it had a little bit of effect, but I didn't really bring it into the world. And when I came across Unified Mindfulness, I realized that there were practices that I could do all day long that were training my mind. And you'll see that in what we're going to do, not just tonight, but in each of the classes. So in these next 6 weeks, and again, when you hear the titles, you may say, that sounds like for beginners. But we're going to go a little bit more in depth, and I'm going to introduce some practices to you that may enliven your current practice. So this week, we're gonna look at why do we practice? Why are we going to even practice mindfulness? Next week, what is mindfulness? Third week is how to meditate. And again, there'll be different ways of understanding what you already do. And then mindfulness of the body. And then the fifth week, mindfulness of thoughts and emotions. And then lastly, how do we translate that into our daily life? That last week, okay? And I'll announce this in the weeks to come, but I won't be here July 10th, which would be the 6th week. So we'll move the 6th class to the 17th of July, and I'll let you all know that. So at Sharp, I'm used to being right in the middle of the nursing station often, or sometimes they even teach in the operating room, believe it or not. It's really kind of odd. So I really like participation, so feel free to, at any point, shoot your hand up, and we'll stop and take your questions, but I'll give time for that as well. So why do we practice mindfulness? What do you think? Why do you do the practice you do? Yes?
Awareness.
Awareness. Okay. Awareness of what?
Thoughts and body, what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, so thoughts, your body, what you're saying. Okay. What else? Why else do we practice? Yes?
I think to be present in the moment and just like find some kind of enjoyment or calm in the moment, whatever's happening.
Right. Yeah, because when you think about it, it's all we have. You know, the past is gone, the future hasn't arrived. We really are in the present moment. What gets in the way for us to be in the present moment?
Life.
Everything.
Life?
I was just going to say, I meditate for the cessation of suffering, my own, and if I'm suffering, I cause suffering. Actually, I started because of the inversion of that. I was causing suffering, so I needed to learn how not to.
Yes.
That was what gets in the way? Being a human.
That's right. And the world we live in. You know, I mean, increasingly it is difficult with social media, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok with some, question. And I want to know what I'm may not support in the future. But all of the environment we live in, the speed of our lives. I was noticing when I was I used my navigation, Apple Navigation, this morning to find the place I had to be. And what do you choose? The fastest route,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't say the safest route. It says the fastest route. And I thought, well, that is so emblematic of the world we live in. So it gets in the way. And then being human, our distractibility, the negativity bias in the brain, the brain automatically goes to negativity. When I get done tonight, even though I've done years of teaching, when I get done tonight, I go to my car, I'm going to start thinking about, well, I forgot to say that, or that was kind of dumb, or, my voice was cloudy, or, we have a negativity bias to the brain that protects us. I like to think that when our ancestors were roaming the jungle, that when a leaf moved, it was the ancestor who said, "Wow, I could be eaten," and ran. They survived, but it was the one who said, "Oh, no big deal, they got eaten." So in our gene pool is the negativity bias of the brain. But it also moves us into a place where we not only cause others to suffer, but we suffer ourselves. And if you remember, the Buddha, when he was asked, we see this in the suttas, when the Buddha was asked, "What do you teach?" Does anybody remember what he said? Yeah. Yeah, he said, "I teach suffering and the relief from suffering," and that's it. Okay. Well, we live in a world that doesn't just focus on suffering. Dan Harris, the ABC Nightline guy who's a big mindfulness advocate now, he tells a story, I love it. He said, when in the 1920s and 1930s, if somebody said to you in the morning, "I was running," you would have said, "Who was chasing you?" Right? Well, what do we say today? If somebody says, "I was running this morning," they're jogging. They're doing it for their health. Even if we don't do those things, we know wellness is important. So one of the ways that the Buddha Dharma is changing as we live it in the West is that we're moving beyond that practice, Buddhist practice, mindfulness practice. It's not just to relieve suffering, it's to have comprehensive well-being. And we know this in our practice. As we get more compassionate, and more loving, and more aware, we become better people. We become better people in the world. So that's something that Shinzen Young, again, the teacher of Unified Mindfulness, he proposes that we practice to be happy. And by that, meaning comprehensive well-being. And that really opens the door to our practice to do a whole bunch of other things that we can use, for example, our awareness to enrich our lives. And you'll see that in what we're going to go through in weeks to come as some of these practices, a practice, for example, not just loving kindness or metta practice, but nurturing positivity. You can include things like creativity and imagination and loyalty and any of the positive emotions that we now have tools to capture that. And that becomes a part of our Dharma practice. So these are the 5 things that this model targets as our goals for practice. 1 is stress relief. We probably suffer more with what we're thinking and feeling, not to mention everything outside. So our practice allows us to relieve stress. And that is a big, a chart. Even though I'm retired, why do they keep me? Okay, because nurses and doctors and patients are suffering a lot. So that they are now understanding that this practice can help people reduce their stress. And then likewise, that we can do practice to be more fulfilled, okay? We can use our practice to grow as human beings. Some of the time I will do whole weeks of just cultivating curiosity And I think we've all experienced that. When you really use it as a practice, it opens up the world. I mean, you can go and read what's on that little box, okay? I went over there to look because I was curious. Well, I didn't used to be very curious. It's become a practice that's opened the world up. So fulfillment is also a valid goal for practice. Understand yourself, practice, and I think we all experience it. We really begin to understand how our minds work, what we're feeling and thinking. And, you know, in psychological models, we would call that emotional intelligence. We become more emotionally intelligent with practice. And then sharpen skills. These practices can help us, whether it's playing the piano, doing your job, drive anything that requires skills. You can take these practices, apply it, and become better at what you do. And you are also developing your mindfulness at the same time. And then lastly, is really service, improve the world. That's what part of what makes us more fulfilled human beings, is because we do serve other people and practice, as you know, and this place, probably more than any Buddhist community I know, lives that out. You all know that. This is a place of service, and your practice really informs that. So I want to, before we do the practice, so all this is nice talk, but I want to give you an experience tonight of what I'm talking about. But I want to use a metaphor first, because what Shinzen Young did 40 years ago, he set out to use the scientific model, particularly algorithmic paradigms, because he knew that if he could capture practice in that scientific model, it would set up the foundation for scientific research. And that's what's happened. He now is, although he's a mindfulness teacher, he's a co-director of the SEMA lab at the University of Arizona, where they're using mindfulness with ultrasound to help the human brain make leaps of awareness. And part of what I do at Sharp is we're using an app, the Equa app from Carnegie Mellon, that's become a trainer on your phone to teach you mindfulness. And they're doing biorhythm measurements to see, and in a sense, get some research that says this works. Now, we don't have to read that or know it to know it works when we practice, but it's a way of opening these doors for other people in the world who wouldn't be interested, and for whom this can become a relief of suffering and a growth model. So the metaphor is that we can use all of our senses to practice what we see. And you think about it, I remember once early on when I was teaching, one of the nurses at Sharp said, "Oh, now I get it. I'm seeing all the time, all day long. I'm hearing all the time, all day long, and I'm feeling. So all my waking hours are seeing, hearing, and feeling." And as we're going to experience, that also includes thoughts and emotions. And I'll show you how that happens. So the metaphor is like, I work out at LA Fitness down in Mission Valley because I'm old, and I know that it's important to build muscle as we get older. So this metaphor is a gym metaphor for our practice. The gym that we're working in, and we're going to do it tonight, is our sense experience, what we see, hear, and feel. That's our gym. The muscles that we're building are 3 mindfulness muscles. One is concentration, and that's the definition of concentration is the ability to choose what to pay attention to that you think is important. And again, in a world that's constantly drawing our attention and distracting us, that ability, that muscle to say, not this right now, but that, is critical. So the first skill, first muscle of the mind is concentration. Second is clarity. And clarity is just noticing the details of whatever we're experiencing. Paying enough attention to be able to see the leaves on a tree. It's funny, the class I taught this morning, nurses at Sharp was in a park. They're having a retreat. One of the nurses said, I always see trees, but I never really noticed the details of the leaves. They were so beautiful. She was ecstatic, So clarity is the second muscle. And the third, and it's a word we don't use in English very often, but it may be, some researchers believe it is the core skill of mindfulness, and that's equanimity. And by that, we define it as, it's just that ability to not fight with our experience. You don't have to push away your experience, and you don't have to hang on. So when you get angry, when you have equanimity, you know you're feeling angry, you feel it, you're aware of it, but you're not reactive to it. And that changes everything. It changes how you work in the world, how you live in the world. Okay? Now, just to be clear, it doesn't mean that when you're angry and you have equanimity, it doesn't mean you don't stop somebody from hurting you, or you don't leave a bad relationship. It doesn't mean you are a doormat in the world. You just have greater skill of making wise and skillful decisions in the world. Okay? So this metaphor is we're working with our senses. We're going to be developing the three muscles: concentration, clarity, and equanimity. And the tools, just like we use weights at the gym, the tools we're going to use really come out of Theravada Buddhism, is noting and labeling. And you're probably familiar with it, or you may be, and we'll be using it, okay? So, before I keep rattling on, any questions or comments before we practice? Or objections? I love objections. Yes?
That app you mentioned, is it available for everyone? Or?
Yeah, I'll mention at the end, but there's two. One is the Equa app. It's EQUA. And when you go on the App Store, Android or Apple, you'll see first comes up Equa water bottles. So go beyond it. You'll see a little black logo with three little rocks, and it's called Equa. And it's free for the first week, I think, to try. The other app we're talking about is called Bright Mind. One word, Bright Mind. I think that's free for a week. It teaches, they're training apps in the model that we're going to be exploring in these schools. Yes?
I've also heard a criticism of meditation and some research that proves that a meditator's mind can become less empathetic. So I was glad you brought up the point of the practice is not to notice the emotion and dismiss it, because I took a course that taught the information that our emotions are trying to give us. Like if we experience anger, it's because, like you said, someone is, like we feel like we have a right to something, or someone has crossed a boundary with us. So the emotion is there to trigger us to something in our environment we need to, that's a threat to us, or that, that we can, but as you say, like when you have mindfulness, you can notice the emotion and then decide what to do with it.
Yes. Yeah, because you have an element of freedom. I'm feeling angry. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. Now, this, I know what I should do, now what am I going to do? So I would say it's the opposite, that when we're more mindful and aware, we become more empathetic. There's more empathy because we know what it feels like, and we're not as likely to be judgmental of someone. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, that was the clarification I was going to ask about. With the word equanimity, I've also been kind of taught to equate with non-discrimination or non-judgment.
Right. Yeah, John Kabat-Zinn came up with that definition of mindfulness. It's awareness in the present moment, non-judgmentally, without judgment. I never liked that because I thought we have to make judgments in the world. I understand what he's saying. At the moment we're meditating, it's good to hold it without judgment. But we've got to make discriminations as well. Yes.
Well, I was also the second part of that equation is the pause, in which, like, if I allow my conditioned mind to react,
Right.
it's going to get ugly.
Yep. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
pause there is to step back from judgment, but also act with right action.
Yes. And it is that moment, that's what the equanimity is about. When, again, the definition is you're not fighting with your experience. You're not trying to push away what you don't want, and you're not hanging on to what you do want. You're having that balance that gives you the freedom to decide what's the right thing to do right now. And we all experience it, but we can actually develop it and increase it. Yes?
Yeah, I like the idea of equanimity for developing equal caring for everybody's happiness equally, regardless of whether they like us or whether they're nice to us.
Right.
We still care about that person's happiness
Yes.
as much as somebody else who likes us and is kind to us.
That's right. Yeah, and the natural reaction when somebody doesn't like us it can be defensive, hurt. We may get judgmental. We can turn it on them. Well, they don't like me because they're a jerk. Okay? We're caught in that mind, and that's when we do the damage that, this man's talking about. But again, if we hold those feelings and thoughts and our experience with equanimity, we're aware of all that, and we're not caught by it. Okay? And then we can decide based on what we believe is the right thing to do, what we know to be right, how do we react? Well, how do we act and not react as well? Why don't we go ahead and practice, and then I'll leave time for more questions and objections. Okay, remember that's how I got to this when I came across Unified Mindfulness. That I don't need another, and I fought it tooth and nail, and it was good. It was good to be a little bit, suspect. So what I'm going to lead us in is what's called a tour of the senses. Remember I said our senses, see, hear, feel, is our gym to train our mind. And as you will see, as I lead us through the tour, we're going to look at see, hear, feel, but we're going to look at out, see out in the world, see in the mind, hear out in the world, hear in the mind, feel out in the world, our bodies, and feel in with emotions. Okay? And this is where it expands your ability to be mindful because you're opening up to all your experience. And just real quick, when we get to, we'll start with see in and hear and go to hear in and feel in. And when I learned this, it blew my mind, and then I thought, it's obvious. When we think, and cognitive scientists will tell us this, when you have a thought, it's either visual or auditory. Have you ever thought about that before? Yeah, and you can experience it. Right now, think of your favorite food and notice where it shows up on your mental screen. Can you see your food? What are you seeing? What, I'm sorry?
Curry.
Curry. What else? Yes.
Chicken vindaloo.
Chicken vindaloo. I'm seeing a bowl of ice cream right here. Yeah, comes and goes, right? So thought is visual, and we can even we can label it see. Oh wow, I'm not just caught by my thought. I'm aware of my thought. Hear, same way. here is, thoughts can be auditory, and we're talking to ourselves all day long. I don't know about you, but sometimes I notice it, and I get tired of hearing myself talk, besides other people, me talking. So just right now, silently recite your phone number to yourself, and notice where it's showing up. For me, it's right here. Can you sense it? Okay. So we're gonna be able to label our thoughts as a sensory experience, a see experience, see in, or a hear in. Okay. And then feel in is emotions show up in the body. Sometimes people don't believe it because they're not. It's hard to get in touch with our emotions. One way to show you this is, and it'll look silly, but put a smile on your face. Do I look silly? But when you do it, can you feel? Can you feel it? Well, that's just a small example. When we're angry, people have different experience. When I'm angry, it shows up right here, and I can feel it in my arms. It's probably some primitive response to go pound somebody, So being aware of it, being able to say feel with it, really opens up my awareness.
What else could an emotion be?
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing, because in this culture, if you say to somebody, what are you feeling? It's kind of like disembodied, right? We have emotions out there, but can we identify they're right in the body? Yeah. So this is a good example of this model helps you be more mindful of your total experience. So let's do a tour of the senses, okay? And we can start with see. And the beautiful thing is this model allows you to meditate with your eyes open, which then allows you to meditate when you're driving. I mean, when I first started teaching this, some of the nurses at Sharp said, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to meditate when I'm driving, I'll crash." Well, you'd be the best driver in the world if you can be mindful when you're driving. So you can start with your eyes open or closed, whatever is comfortable for you. And let's start with see in, okay? And notice that place where the chicken vindaloo showed up, or the ice cream, and just notice that mental screen. And if there's nothing there, feel it as rest. And like all of practice, when you get distracted, which you will, when the mind wanders, just come back to see in. And you can even label it if you want, see. Strengthens your concentration. Okay, let's let go of that. And now, if your eyes are closed, you're going to see a dark mental screen with a little bit of light. If your eyes are open, notice something in the room that you find interesting and focus your attention on it. Just rest your attention there and really look at it. You're going to throw your attention at it. And you can even use the label see. See. And when you get distracted, bring your attention back to what you see. And notice the details. That's the clarity. Okay, we can let go of see. Let's do hear. Hear in. Notice that place with eyes open or closed. Notice the place where your phone number showed up in your thoughts. There's actually a place in our brains that we can visualize it. And if there's nothing there, if you're not telling yourself, if you're not hearing yourself say, wow, this is the dumbest thing I ever did. Or if it's empty, it can be restful. Okay, we can let go of here in, and now bring your attention to the sounds around us, here out. And notice how many sounds you can hear. And notice how the sounds may change, get louder, softer, have patterns. That's the clarity. Okay, you can let go of here. Now let's do feel as the last sense category. Feel in, just check out if you can sense any emotion going on in your body. You might be anxious, you might be bored, you might be energized. Notice what it feels like. And if there's nothing there, count that as rest. And just enjoy the peacefulness. Okay, that's feel in. And then lastly, let's do feel out. And feel out is our physical sensations in our body. It includes taste, smell, touch, anything you feel physically. So bring your attention, eyes open or closed, to your body. Maybe notice your feet resting on the floor, your back against the chair. Any restful experiences or any pain or discomfort, just notice it. Again, just bringing equanimity to it. Just letting it be there. Okay, so bringing attention back into the room. How was that? What'd you experience? Yes.
I just felt like I was really practicing concentration.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt good.
It felt good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were. You even if it's momentary. Within the Buddhist suttas, there's two types of concentration. We tend to think of concentration as sustained moment. I can pay attention for 5 minutes to a movie. Okay. So that's one form. But the other form of concentration is momentary. Those moments where we really almost like toss our attention onto something for a moment. The metaphor is like shooting an arrow at a target. You point at the target, you shoot the arrow, and you watch the arrow go there. And you can do that for moments, or you can do it for sustained, and you are developing that muscle of concentration. And what I think many of us experience, the deeper our concentration, the more we can calm down. It's what I'm teaching at Sharp. I'm teaching the nurses, like this morning, I was teaching them to pay attention to what they they see, hear, or feel when they're in the nurse's station. They can do it for a moment. Because after you practice and the concentration develops, you can calm your whole body down. What else? What else did people experience?
Well, it's an escape, mini escape, without transporting anyone necessarily.
Yeah, and the irony is that you're more present and less escaping than you would be if you purposely decide to think about something else. When you think about it, if you're really totally aware, as best you can be with distraction, of what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling, you are totally in the present moment. Totally in the present moment. Yes?
I found the whole thing very pleasurable.
It was pleasurable?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
It's quiet. Like when I was seeing out,
Yeah.
I was noticing the pleasantness of the sort of beholding of something without the desire of it.
Yes, the equanimity. Did everybody hear that? Yeah. Yeah, so it can be pleasant, but also when you develop that skill of equanimity, even pain. I've got knees. I'm almost 77, and I've got knees. Okay, any of you on my side of 70 know you just got knees. And it can either ruin your whole day, or you can develop your equanimity. It's just there in the background. I also have tinnitus. Anybody else have tinnitus? Yeah. And I've had people come into my classes who basically have gone to psychologists and medical doctors, done everything to get rid of it. And you can't. There's no cure for it. You know what? It has become, through my practice, a wonderful little companion. No, seriously, anytime, I hear it right now. Anytime I want to hear something, it's a high-pitched and it changes, I can just sit here and listen to it. And it's deepening my mindfulness practice. And it's a good example of how my equanimity skill has transformed what at the beginning I was fighting. Every time I would hear it, I would start pushing away because it was getting in the way. And then I began to accept it with equanimity, and it became...
It also works with what I have been calling the low hum of discontent that's sort of at the bottom of everything.
Yes.
You can be curious and make friends with that.
Yes.
It actually helps a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, the muscle or the skill of equanimity can apply to anything you're experiencing, and also pleasurable things. What our addictions to whatever it is, or our desire for pleasure. There's that old saying that, suffering is getting what you don't want and not getting what you do want, okay? It's kind of the way we're built, right? But equanimity means that when I don't get what I want, I can be okay with that. When I get what I don't want, bad knees and tinnitus, I can be okay with that. Yes?
I have a question. So I don't pay attention to sound, but my husband, he meditates with me here sometimes, and he was describing to somebody, and he said, all the traffic outside, and you hear the birds, the parrots in the morning, and I don't hear any, and I thought, I don't hear any of that ever.
Oh.
And the tinnitus, I know I've got it, I never pay attention to it, when we did that listening, there it is, unless I'm aware of it, So I just don't notice it. So that's something that I should pay more attention to rather than...
Well, I don't know about should,
but I know should is a tough word.
But now you may be curious. What is he experiencing that you're missing? Like this morning when I did that class with the nurses in the park, and we did hear out. It said, just see how many different sounds you can hear. And what the feedback was, people said things like, I can't believe I never heard the birds before, and I heard so many different kinds. And bird watchers know that. Okay, they're attuned. That world is opened up. And again, that's where this comprehensive well-being can happen with our mindfulness practice. The world becomes rich in ways that we've never experienced it before. Yes?
Yeah, and for me, like the word relaxing comes to mind when we're accepting everything exactly as it is. We can finally relax, and then you don't really suffer when you relax.
Right.
You more like everything becomes more spacious, and you just have a different experience of reality.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I hinted at that when I said if when you were paying attention to hear in and there was nothing there, or see in and there was nothing there, sometimes the mind gets quiet, believe it or not, but we tend not to notice it. But so when you're not thinking, we're not usually aware of it. You can become aware of it, and it becomes a source of rest. And in the fourth week, we're going to focus on mindfulness of the body, and we're going to really explore and experientially hear how you can experience those restful states that are always there, and you can choose them. And when you get skillful, even when you're under stress, you can go there and calm yourself down, because there's always restful states. And then sometimes the see in, hear in, and feel in, the mind goes silent. We tend not to notice, but we can start noticing when that happens, and it's the most incredible, peaceful state. And of course, if you lose your equanimity and try to hang on to it, it goes, right? Right away you start thinking, oh, what happened? But these practices can get us in touch with, we don't have to just go on vacation to get away, okay? We can take a vacation no matter what. So why don't we practice for just a few more minutes? I'm going to stop on time. You know, the worst thing is having a mindfulness teacher who's not aware of the time. And that's easy. I don't know about you. I've had some teachers, they're still going on, and it's 8:10, and I'm thinking, what happened to their mindfulness? So I want to stop on time, because people have things to do. So let's take just a few minutes and allow this time, you can either choose one of the senses, see, hear, or feel, in or out, or let your attention float to wherever it goes, and then use the labels. If it's see, label it see. If it's hear, label it hear. Feel, feel. Okay? So let's do it for maybe 3 minutes. And as you become aware of what you're experiencing, you can just experience it or use the label. Is it see? Is it hear? Is it feel? Okay. Let me stop. So in the weeks to come, we'll dig a little deeper in these practices. So tonight was more like an introduction, okay? And maybe you experienced something about your mind that you've never experienced before, but it's been there, okay? Simple thing like that you realize that you're talking to yourself all the time, okay? And that you can become aware of it by labeling it, okay? So a simple example. If you want to pursue this week, I have 2 suggestions. One is, when you're out in the world, meditate. And it can be for a moment. You're in the car, and all of a sudden you notice the traffic, and you might just do a C practice. Really notice the traffic. Listen to the sounds. You're outdoors. Take a moment. Because what we know is, even in those moments of practice in the real world, we're strengthening our concentration, the muscles, concentration, clarity, and equanimity. It's as important as sitting in this meditation hall and practicing. This is training, but that is out there too. So what I would ask you to do is just try it and see if you don't increase your own awareness. These little moments, okay? And then the second thing is, if you want to check out an app, the Equa, E-Q-U-A, is for iPhones and Androids, and it's free initially, or Brightline. And then lastly, if you Google Unified Mindfulness, there's a core training that's free. It's actually fun. It's cartoons. It introduces you to just what we practice tonight. So it's Unified Mindfulness. You can Google, and then just look under Learning and Core Training. It's absolutely free, and it'll introduce you. They'll have your email, so you'll get some emails, of course, but you can unsubscribe. And then I want to thank you so much for coming tonight. Jeff was right. It was somewhere between 1 person and 100,000. So I'm really pleased to see you. And please come back next week. Okay? Thank you so much.
All right, Bob, I got a closing announcement. All right. Good evening, everybody. Hello. I am tonight's host, Stephen. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution, I'm gonna get that one day, redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack out there. We have a lending library towards the back here. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. For this evening, if you could please just straighten up your seat, and as you head out, get a few people to help me close up the windows and latch the windows. That'd be helpful. And thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again.
And I'll be around for a bit if you have questions or objections. Let me